Well, good afternoon, Cedar Falls, and welcome to this special meeting for Monday, September 26, 2022. I'll now call this meeting to order with a roll call from Madam Clerk.
Schultz.
Here.
DeBoer. Cruz.
Here.
Harding.
Here.
Canfield.
Here.
Sires.
Here.
Dunn. Here. Councilor DeBoer absent, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And now, as part of our new habit, we say the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. So with that, the only agenda item that we have for tonight is old business. First, this would be a motion to reconsider action taken relative to the resolution for submission of a rail crossing elimination grant to the Federal Railroad Administration and approving and authorizing the local match relative to abandoning and removing the Cedar Falls rail spur. In order to have this reconsideration, we would first need to have a voice vote on the action itself, just to entertain a reconsideration. These motions have to occur from two people on the prevailing side. So does anyone from the prevailing side previously wish to entertain a reconsideration?
I do, Mr. Mayor.
So moved by Councilmember Ganfield. Do we have a second from
I'll second.
prevailing? Okay. So motion and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oh,
Aye. Nay.
opposed?
Nay.
Nay. Okay, so ayes do have it, and that would take us over to this old business of reconsidering the action taken relative to a resolution approving and authorizing submission of a railroad crossing elimination to the FRA and approving and authorizing the local match relative to abandoning and removing the Cedar Falls rail spur. Is there a motion to approve this item?
So moved. Second.
Motion and seconded. First, to open it up for discussion, last council meeting, we just had questions about the item, but we didn't really talk through the full item itself. And I thought that there would be benefit to us to hear from city staff first on what this railroad grant entails, and then to have the opportunity for a representative from Cedar Falls Utilities and from the Iowa Northern Railroad to explain the situation in their terms, and then to open it up for council questions and comments. So to start us off for city staff, we have Chris Seavey, who will provide us with just an overview of this memo that was in our council packet. So
Thank you,
Seavey,
Mr. Mayor.
the floor is yours.
Good evening, Mayor and councilors. As you are aware, the Federal Railroad Administration has issued a notice of funding opportunity for the elimination of railroad crossings. If awarded the grant, the FRA would fund 80% of the grant amount, with 20% being the local match. The Iowa Northern Railway Company is partnering with the city on the grant application, or would partner with the city, and would split the local match 50-50. I appreciate the opportunity to give the overview of the grant opportunity before you this evening. The initial memo in your packet outlined the benefits of the grant and also the challenges we face without it. With regard to the challenges, just to clarify, Without the grant, what happens with the rail is entirely up to the Iowa Northern Railway Company, and their most likely decision, which they have communicated, will be to abandon the rail line and sell their land on the open market. Now, that's not written in stone, but that's their most likely option. Another alternative to abandonment is for Iowa Northern to find another customer to service on the rail, which would increase rail traffic through downtown. Any increase to rail traffic on this line would significantly disrupt and delay traffic, basically cutting off downtown from other parts of the city. Any substantial use of the rail line could alter or delay commutes, school attendance, business operations, emergency responses, and any other important activities. Also, we don't entirely know the magnitude of safety implications of regular use, but with 22 at-grade crossings in the downtown area with few warning signals, the risk index is anticipated to be very high for this corridor. So abandonment or increased use are challenges we face without the grant. Now let's look at benefits that we stand to gain with this grant, if awarded. So 1, it will pay for the reconstruction of areas including 5th Street, and that's work that will cost the city close to $5 million if we were to shoulder those reconstruction efforts without the grant. Number 2, the city will gain control and ownership of rights-of-way and lands that present opportunity for redevelopment in downtown. Note that any purchase of these rights-of-way without the grant is an additional cost to the city. Number 3, certain alleys can be opened up so the proper traffic flow can be reestablished, and unbuildable lots will then become buildable. One that comes to mind is the block where the train depot sits between Main and State. Number 4, in the grant, we would request funding to close an opening in the flood wall, which the rail currently crosses. Any flood wall opening presents a higher flood risk to the city and residents. Number 5, perhaps one of the more appealing or notable facets of this grant for residents is that the city would gain control of the spur bridge that runs under Highway 58. The plan with the grant would be to repurpose this bridge as a trail connection to connect the South Riverside Trail to downtown. Pedestrians and cyclists currently have to go to Waterloo Road around the west side of CFU in order to get to downtown. The total project cost is estimated to be $12.2 million. This total reflects all costs involved with abandoning the CFU spur, purchasing the right-of-way, removal of the tracks, signals, and crossings, the restoration and reconstruction of the impacted streets, sidewalks, curbs, and landscaping, including engineering, design, survey, and inspection. Of the $12.2 million, the city improvements via land purchase, reconstruction, landscaping, and restoration are estimated to run close to $8 million. With the funding structure of the grant, 80% of the $12.2 million would be federally funded, and the remaining $2.44 million would be split 50-50 via cost-sharing partnership between Cedar Falls and Iowa Northern Railway Company. So our obligation under this grant would be $1.22 million. The sources of funding from the city will be determined during upcoming capital improvements planning. If the grant is received, a contract for the design and work to be performed will be brought before council at a later date. In order to submit the grant, a letter of support and a funding commitment letter are needed from council to submit with the grant. The deadline for submittal is in the first part of October. We would anticipate from the Federal Railroad Administration a notification of intent to award by March 2023. Staff recommends submitting a request for grant funding through the Railroad Crossing Elimination Grant Program in the amount of $12.2 million, of which the city's obligation would be $1.22 million. Staff recommends approval and resolutions for 1, support of submitting the application for the RCE grant, or Railroad Crossing Elimination Grant, and 2, financial assurances for the project.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Seavey. We also have Tom Rizzi from Cedar Falls Utilities. Steve Bernard couldn't be here tonight, but Mr. Rizzi has the information that also appeared in your council packet this time that wasn't included in the first packet back last Monday. This information from Mr. Bernard as the GM explains what the market conditions are, environmental regulations, and the detailed reasons why CFU strongly recommends the approval of this grant and participation in the project. So, Mr. Rissy, if you could give us an outline of what's in that information, then we'll have questions for you, I'm sure, at the end.
Sure. Well, the bottom line is the loss of the rail service to the utilities is not going to impact our ability to burn coal at all, and we believe it will not impact the cost of electricity for our customers. The market conditions, as Steve has pointed out there, we're a member of MISO. We have access to low-cost energy year-round. If we can generate it cheaper, we do, to save our customers money. And if we can buy it cheaper, then we obviously will buy it off the grid cheaper. We primarily burn natural gas in the plant due to a lot of environmental regulation changes over the years. Particularly on unit number 7, our larger unit, it's a 90% gas unit now. And our smaller unit number 6, the Stoker coal unit, it has a CO limitation on it. So we primarily burn natural gas, but we can burn coal when electricity prices get very high or if natural gas supplies get tight. So we are a reliable source of power for the city. Our annual runtime, as a result, because of the reasons I just outlined, is lower. But again, we're able to burn or able to run all year long. It's just that our runtime on coal over the last, since 2010, we pretty much only burn coal for testing purposes. And in Winter Storm Uri of 2021 February event, we burned some coal then. But we got plenty of inventory in stock to last us in excess of 20 years at our current burn rate. Getting coal into town is another issue from the coal mines. A lot of the coal mines are shipping stuff south to go overseas. The amount of tonnage that we need is really light compared to other power plants. So coming up into this area, it's getting more difficult to even get a rail rate from a mainline carrier to get it into town. So glad to answer any questions you may have at this time.
Okay. Councilmember Schultz.
I have a couple. So what's the purpose of CFU? Are we a distribution, are you a distribution center or are you a power generation center?
Well, we're both. We have a distribution system and we have power generation. We have transmission as well. We'll service.
What would you say is the percentage of, say, it being a distribution that you're bringing in power from? What grid are you on?
We're on the Mid-Continent Independent System Operator, MISO, it's referred to.
So we're a part of that grid, and we then bring it into CFU and we distribute it then to our to the customers of CFU.
That is correct.
And what percentage would you say that we're distribution, and how much of the year in a year, say if a year is 100%, how much of that is distribution and how much of it is power generation?
I think you're asking how much do we generate on an annual basis compared to how much we buy from MISO. I don't have those statistics right with me, but I know that during the summertime and during the extreme cold winter time is the times that we generate the most. If I had to put it on a percentage basis, I'd say 10 to 15% of the time we probably generate with Streeter Station.
And maybe 90% of the time you're bringing it in from Mid-Continent.
Yes.
The generation of that you're bringing in, are they coming from natural gas facilities or are they coming from coal facilities?
Both. The wholesale price of electricity in the MISO is pretty much dictated by the natural gas prices now. there's been a huge shift over the years. A large percentage used to be coal-fired generation, and now larger percentage is natural gas-fired. So it's a combination of, we have a lot of wind resources. CFU has invested in high-voltage transmission lines in the area to help bring renewable energy into town. So it also facilitates bringing in lower cost, eliminating bottlenecks so that the cost from MISO stays low.
So we had a lot of talk this summer and fall about the resilience plan. Where does this sit in with our resilience plan? If we get rid of the spur, what's our backup plan? How are we prepared if some catastrophe would happen?
Well, we have a large inventory of coal in storage now. We also have the ability to truck coal in. And in 2013, we did just that. We brought 3,000 ton of stoker coal into town that we needed, and it was not available by rail.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Councilor Cyrus.
I have a couple questions. How high do the natural gas prices have to get before you switch to coal? Because I know UNI is starting to switch to coal right now, and all summer long they went ahead and used natural gas. They're predicting that our natural gas price is going to triple. Now, over in the UK, it's gone up 7 times. So they're burning all coal over there. I don't want us to get trapped into a way we can't burn coal when I watch UNI do it and buy off of our pile. And that's where I see the problem. I can't understand why we would choke a way to get coal in. And how many years worth of coal do we have sitting there?
At the current burn rate, we've got in excess of 20 years of coal sitting there. Natural gas prices, like you said, have gone up quite a bit. We've seen them as high as $9 per million BTUs. I think today it was just under $5. The replacement cost of coal is equivalent, when you put it on a BTU basis, is in the $9 per million BTUs, or $9 gas. It's equivalent to that. Our current coal pile, we're in the $4 per million BTU range. So if it gets where natural gas, or our cost to operate these units on natural gas gets too high, then we can burn coal. However, I'm limited on the amount of coal that we can burn because of EPA regulations. I can only burn 10% of the heat input from coal on an annual basis is all I'm allowed to burn. So if I burn 1 week of coal, I have to burn 9 more weeks of natural gas to offset that.
Okay, when you said that you have 20 years worth, that's at the current rate.
Yes, sir.
So that current rate is only what, 10%, 5%? So it'd only be a year's worth of coal we have on hand if we burned it full time. Is that not true? It's not 20 years, it's only, you said it was 20 years at the current rate that we burn coal.
That's right. And we burn coal if we need to during an emergency, or you can't get gas.
And what are we going to do when that gas price triples? Did we not keep up with our coal furnace so
Yes.
that it meets EPA, so we could burn coal all the time if we needed to?
On one of the units, the larger unit at Cedar Station is a 90% gas unit now with the EPA. It was cost prohibitive to put the mercury controls on that unit to make it comply with the mercury and air toxic standard. So 90% of our heat input has to come from natural gas on that unit.
Right now, we can only burn 10% because we don't
On
have...
an annual basis.
Thank you.
Mr. Reese, in the letter from Mr. Bernard, it says, under market conditions, the CFU is part owner of 3 large coal-fired plants located on the Missouri River. The generation cost of these plants is much lower than our current local plants due to better burner efficiency and access to lower-cost coal. The coal is much less expensive than what we could get locally due to the quantity purchased and competitive rail access to those plants. This greatly reduces the runtime of local CF units. Could you speak to that as far as what that would mean if we have a energy spike and we need to the price increases on us?
Sure. So the joint-owned units are the Council Bluffs 3 and 4 unit, or the Walter Scott units 3 and 4 in Council Bluffs, and the George Neal South Station, Neal 4 we refer to it, and that's in Sioux City. We have transmission lines between those power plants and here, and on an annual basis, 2/3 of our energy that our customers use comes from those plants because they run a lot more. They're larger units. They're in the 600 to 800 megawatt size power plants, where Streeter Station is 55 combined megawatts. They have a more efficient heat rate, which means they produce electricity more efficiently than ours because they're newer. So they have large rail contracts. They burn Powder River Basin coal from out west. Where they literally buy millions of tons of coal a year, so the economies of scale, they get it much cheaper.
So is it likely then that if we have price spikes, that we'd be using the MISO grid to generate the electricity and not Streeter Station for the most part?
Yeah, well, so every day we look at this. If the price of wholesale electricity is higher than we can produce it, then we start the plant, and we have 2 combustion turbines on West 27th Street that we also run. Under emergency conditions, we can dispatch UNI. So our joint-owned units are normally online, and like I said, a large percentage of our power is coming from those plants. Otherwise, if it's cheaper on the MISO grid, then we'll purchase it from MISO.
Okay. So we have some options there, is what you're saying, some flexibility?
Yes, sir.
Okay. If no other council questions right now for CFU, I'd like to bring up Iowa Northern Railroad, Mr. McGee. So Bill McGee is the general manager of Iowa Northern Railway and is a key stakeholder in the project. And I'll just say I had an opportunity to talk with him and with Steve Bernard last Thursday, along with Councilmember Schultz and Ganfield, for some additional information, and asked if Mr. McGee might be able to present some of that to us this afternoon as well. So, Mr. McGee, the floor is yours, sir.
Okay, sure. Thank you, Mayor Green, City Council. I don't know how else to put this. Iowa Northern's been operating this line for quite a long time now. And, we've stuck by and held in there hoping that maybe things would change, or, whatever, that we'd be able to make more revenue off the line. Fact of the matter is, it's not going that way. It hasn't been for quite a long time. And we feel like it's time to make a decision. One way or the other, we do need to abandon the line. And it just so happened that the grant opportunity that we've been talking about was presented in November of last year. And it seemed like a really nice fix for both the city and the railroad. And that's why we brought it to the city's attention. I don't know how to do this other than shotgun it. We talked about rail service and being able to get coal in this area. Well, there are 2 railroads here. There's the CN, there's the Iowa Northern. Both of us, I'm sure, would be willing to do what we could to get coal to a site where it could be offloaded and trucked into CFU. That would be one way to handle it. There are others, but we understand the concern, but the fact of the matter is, how long can you expect the railroad to stay here and keep the line open with no business? We've tried to store cars. Fact of the matter is, it attracts trespassers. We've had kids on top of cars as recent as 2 weeks ago. We've had a kid fall off a car years ago. We can't patrol it. We can't police it. We've got the crossings coming into town. That's another problem. There are 8 crossing signals, individual crossings coming into town. These signals are old. I'm talking like 60, 70 years old. The equipment is old. We have to maintain them in working order, and we do that. But the problem with them is, if you don't run trains every day, the rail gets rusty. If the rail is rusty, there's the potential for an activation failure, meaning that a train operating over the tracks won't activate the signals. So when we bring a train into town, we have to stop and flag each crossing. And we all know what that means. The longer it takes to get in and out, the more people are waiting to get across the tracks. If you have a train of any length, it takes time to put the train away once you get it in here. If you're taking a train out, it takes time to put the train together and brake test it. So every time a train stops and you're blocking crossings, it's a natural thing for people that are standing there waiting to think, when is this train going to move again? And if they're on foot, there's a pretty good chance that they might take the risk of trying to cross over or under the train. So from the railroad standpoint, it's dangerous. There's no way to make it safer. We've tried and tried to come up with a way to locate a customer back in there. The fact of the matter is, if we did it, whoever it is would need to move a lot of cars to make this line worthwhile to keep it open from a revenue producing standpoint. That's kind of where we are. And our hopes are that we can partner up, turn in this application. If we get it, the city will be taken care of. It'll be great back in here. It'll be really nice. There'll be good trails. There'll be all of the city streets and everything will be fixed properly like they should be. And it'll be good for the railroad also because we will relocate our assets, and it'll strengthen northeast Iowa because we will use those assets. I've been here again almost 20 years now. In the 20 years I worked for the Iowa Northern, we've had $860 million, we estimate, spent on locating industry on our railroad. Out of that $860 million, $574 million have been spent in Shell Rock, just up the road. And it's produced over 255 jobs to date, and we expect it'll be 450 to 500 in the next few years. So it's not like the money's not being spent the way it should be to promote northeast Iowa. It is. And the fact of the matter is, it's not that far from here. I think that's pretty much sums up where we're coming from. We're hoping that we go the direction of the grant because it would be good for both parties. And if there's any questions, I'd be glad to try to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. McGee. First question, did you have an estimate of the value for the salvage of pulling up the rail line, what that would provide for you?
It is approximately 1.3 billion.
Okay, so that's basically recycled line that you can use elsewhere?
It is.
Or at
and
Butler?
to kind of break that down, first of all, we can talk about cross ties. Okay, the wood cross ties in the track. If you graded what's out there, about half of the ties over the distance that we're talking about are of relay quality, meaning you could take it and put it somewhere else in a track and it would serve its purpose for a number of years to come. It's worth reclaiming. The other half of the ties are scrap. They would go to scrap. Working our way up from that, about half of the line has rail that's been put in the past 20 years. That's pretty good rail that came with the crossing programs we did in earlier years. I think that was around 2008 to 2010 in that period of time. That rail is good rail for reuse. The remaining rail that's out here is 110-pound rail, 112-pound rail that's been in service for many, many years, over 80 years old. And that rail would be more suitable to scrap. The crossings. So we've got all these crossings through town that were rehabilitated in, I can't remember, I think it was 2010 was when we did that job. And a lot of the panels can be reused. Some of them can't be. It just depends on where they are, and things like salt use and that type of thing take their toll on it. But quite a bit of that material can be reused and will be reused by the railroad to make other crossings safer.
Okay. That answers my question. I appreciate it.
Some of the signals, I guess I need to keep going. Some of the signal material, same thing, can be reused. But a lot of the signal material that's out there is, like I said, it's 70 years old. It's time to retire it.
Okay. for questions, Councilor Hardy?
Yeah, I have a question. It's probably no secret that I support this, as I voted yes last time, and I've been continuing to look into it, both sides. The question I have is if we choose as a city to not support the grant, then and the railroad chooses to abandon it, where does that? And maybe this is a question from staff, but where does that leave us? We end up losing, it's a lose for us, obviously, but it's not like we can magically still use the tracks to get coal that way, can we? Or am I missing something?
If the railroad abandons the line,
Yes.
what would happen, and this is generally speaking, what would happen is the railroad would sell the real estate. Possibly to speculation, to somebody that came along and wanted to buy it. We would remove the material, just like we just talked about. All that material would come up. It's worth roughly 1.3 is what we think it's worth. And most likely we would remove the material and use it just like I'm talking about. What goes to scrap, but what can be reused would be reused.
So my point, I guess, is that we end up in a situation where we don't get any money towards this. The land is sold, the rights to the land is sold, and we end up with no track there anyway. So
And no control over the right.
and no control over the right of way.
Now,
and-
if the city would like to buy the right of way and we get to that point, Iowa Northern would sell it.
But that's estimated at $2.6 million in value,
It's
correct?
estimated at 3.2,
So
discounted at 2.6.
yeah. So I guess that's my point, is that every direction I look at this, we end up in a worse situation if we don't work in this capacity together. And I just wanted,
Iowa Northern sees this.
and that's the way, what I wanted people to see too, is that it's not a decision made lightly. We realize there are ramifications to this and we want to have options, but this is a decision that if we choose to not work with the railway and CFU, we could potentially be putting the city in a much, much worse situation that would cost at least 5 times to 10 times more. So, and still not have the railroad. So that was my question. I just wanted to make sure I was understanding that was the direction the railroad was going. And
Correct.
thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councilor Cyrus.
The 1.3 million in salvage, that's how much we're going to be putting up anyway. I would just assume we purchased that from you and then held that as a property of Cedar Falls Utilities. And at a future time, if we needed to use that for rail, you'd be glad to come on our rails and bring that coal in there. It'd be a win-win for both of us. We're spending the same amount of money, and then we still have that same opportunity. Is that not true?
You understand that if we abandon, we're selling them.
No, I'm not talking about abandoning.
Please
No,
let him finish, Councilor Cyrus. Go ahead, Mr.
No, our intent is to abandon the railroad one way or the other.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, please.
But could we purchase that from you intact just like it is without the abandonment?
You
And
mean
then
the track.
The track and,
The track and the right of way, I would
right,
say, could be purchased from the railroad.
that's what I'm asking, because that's what I would rather do than spend the money, have the tracks taken out. That's all. I'm not saying you shouldn't make a profit on your investment. That's not me at all. All I'm trying to do is keep that open, and I'd like to see you guys make money and bring coal into us. I'm not in any way trying to make you not make a profit, but I think there's some way we could get along and you could come in on that track and we could own it. That's all. We're going to spend the same amount of money. It doesn't make any sense to me to just take that out. I would rather see us, we should have probably kept up and be able to bring in enough coal that you could make money. That's what I'm after. I'm after you to make money, but I'm after us to have the opportunity to bring coal in. That's all. That's what my question was driving at, that we would purchase that from them and it would cost the same amount of money and we'd leave that opportunity open. That's all. And I want to thank you for all your information, but that's really what I'm after. I'm after you guys to make profit, and I'm after us to keep our opportunities open. That's all. Thank you.
Mayor?
And I would just want to clarify first. So for the costs, if the city were to purchase the track, would that be just the 1.3 or 2.6 million for the right of way, or also the 1.3 million for the value of the rail itself? For
Again,
total?
the right-of-way was appraised at 3.2. It was discounted to 2.6, and that had to do with COVID and a crazy market and all those kinds of things.
But would you say then, still, for the cost of that cost of the salvage, if you're selling us the rail on top of the property itself and all the signals and everything else?
The right-of-way is a separate issue from the materials.
So I would calculate that at 1.3 plus 2.6 for 3.9 million is what we would end up having to
On the
pay to own
surface,
that.
that's what I would say. We never really considered that as an option.
So,
It hasn't been discussed.
Mr. Mayor.
yes, Councilmember Cyrus.
But you would consider that and probably discount since you would have a chance to still make money on that line, on that rail line. It would be a better opportunity for you to leave that there and then make money on it later when we owned it.
All I'll say is it sounds like a great idea, but the fact of the matter is a railroad is like anything else. If you don't use it, it becomes harder and harder to maintain. And that's the key issue. That's the real problem with it.
Right.
If you don't use it, it's tough to keep it.
Right, and I'd like to see regular coal come in. Yeah, I'd like us both to get along. I think that'd be great.
Councilmember Schultz.
Yeah, Mr. McGee,
Yes.
based on the distance, how much line are we talking? Are we talking a mile, 2 miles, 5 miles?
It's 11,641 feet, I think.
2 miles
That-
plus
that
some.
is a little over 2 miles, and it stretches from just to the north of First Street all the way down to the end of track, which is below 58, about 500 feet, I would say.
So per year, what do you speculate, or what do you know is the cost to maintain a line? Do you have a price per mile, or do you have an idea of how much it would cost the city to maintain this 2 miles of track per year?
We put in, let me think here. It's about 16 hours a month is what we have for signal maintenance. That's our signal maintainers that come in here. And the reason it's that much is not because the work is so hard, but we need 2 people to do it and do it safely because of the flagging when you're working and you're shunning the circuits up through town here on 5th Street and Iowa Street. You need an extra person to make it safe to be able to get out there in the track and do what you have to do.
If the city were to own this stretch of track, is that something that we would have to take on that responsibility, or would it be a service that we'd have to hire a rail company like yours to do?
That's the problem. Again, the signals are out here, you know. They're all in place and they work. They do work, but you can't rely on them because of as I explained, the rusty rail problem. So if you don't use it all the time and keep the rails shiny, there's that risk that they won't work when they need to work. Or you get out on the crossing and they're working, and then as the train goes by, they cease working. And then you don't have the lights flashing while the train's hanging over the crossing. So I don't know if I'm answering your question.
Yeah, you are.
It's just
Yeah.
it's hard to maintain a railroad unless you use it.
Okay, thank you.
The track itself, I'll say this, it's in halfway decent condition. It's okay for what it is. That's not the issue. Another thing, and I don't know, it's something that bothers me, but I look at it all the time, you know, and it's one of those things, when you get used to it, you notice it. But if you left here and you go through town and you zigzag and you look at all the alleys and the various streets going around, all the way around up to McDonald's, and you really look at it, what you're going to see is all these trees, and some of them ornamental, some of them not, some of them overgrown. Fact of the matter is, all of it should be cut to make it safe to be able to operate a train through this area. And the reason for that is there's no sight distance at the crossings. It's just I can just keep going on and you'll get tired of hearing me, but that's the fact of the matter is it's just unsafe to operate the way it is. So if the city owned it, it would be my recommendation that you pretty much level every tree out there that's anywhere near the tracks.
Okay. Councilor Harding.
Just had a question. Maybe this goes back to the CFU, but the last time we brought coal in, we had to bring it in by truck because it was not available through train. Is that correct? And why? I'm just curious. Like, are there reasons?
Yeah, there's two different types of coal. We have the pulverized coal and we have stoker coal. Stoker coal we can burn in both units. The pulverized coal we can only burn in one, the 90% gas unit. So the stoker coal mines, because of the way they mine it, they don't even have rail access anymore. They can't load very many cars in a day. And the large rail companies, the BN and the CN, they want to bring 100 plus cars at a time when they come in, which is 10 to 12,000 ton of coal at a time. And we simply don't need that much. We don't burn that much. But to get coal from stoker mines by rail isn't even possible right now.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Ganfield, did you have a question?
Sure. As I was thinking this through, part of the reason that I wanted to reconsider is because I didn't have all the information clear about the abandonment. That's going to happen anyway, as it sounds, and I appreciate Mr. McGee's input here. That cost to us obviously would be astronomically higher than the 1.2 that's looking at here. I appreciate Mr. Sire's creativity in looking through this with what other options exist, but frankly, if you, the expert of the railway and service there, are going to abandon it because it's not a business model that you want to sustain, we shouldn't become landlords of a railway either. So I don't think that's something that we need to entertain a ton more discussion on, purchasing the rail line and the rights of way. Personally, that amount of unsafe crossings in our downtown area is a concern that made me rethink and look at this again. If we can vacate these crossings, that's exactly what this grant money is for. My primary hesitancy is I didn't want to add in an unplanned expenditure, but with the knowledge that we can expense this out over the next few years in CIP, I've kind of reconsidered whether or not we should be for that. Halfway tongue-in-cheek talked about a coupon not being worth anything unless you were going to spend that money anyway. Well, we're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. This money is going to be spent, whether it's 1.2 in this grant application and that project, or, potentially upwards of $8 million in all the street reconstruction when it's on our dime later. So I guess I'd be amenable to looking at this as a partnership that's a win-win and not continue to look in purchasing that land.
Okay. If we're into the zone where we want to make comments, I'd like to open it up for public comment first and then bring it back to the council for final comments.
Sure.
So if let's have Mr. Schroll, if you'd like to come forward first. Name and address for the record, please, sir.
Hi, Andrew Schroll, 930 Newman Avenue. I'm chair of the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, and I'm speaking on behalf of the committee today. We urge council to seek this excellent grant opportunity for our community where our share of the investment would only be 10%. What follows is a draft letter of support. The Cedar Falls Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee voices support for the Cedar Falls RCE grant application. While the Cedar Falls Rail Spur has served the city in the past, removing the railroad would bring large benefits to the community. A primary benefit is safety improvements for pedestrians and bicyclists through the removal of railroad crossings. Additionally, substantial sections of the tracks are within the roadway and run parallel or near parallel to the direction of travel, amplifying the chance for injury. Removing dangerous obstacles like this reduces the barrier to entry for new bicycle riders. An excellent safety opportunity is also provided by utilizing a portion of the line for recreational trail connection between Pfeiffer Springs Park and Washington Park. In particular, the new trail would allow runners, walkers, and bikers to connect straight to downtown, thereby avoiding a street crossing of high concern at Utility Parkway due to its poor visibility, incidents, and many close calls. The repurposing would become a wonderful connection and entry point to the downtown area from our regional trail system. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Schroll. And sir, would you like to come forward? I understand you have a sort of con argument, if you'd like to. Go right ahead, sir. His name and address for the record.
Dwayne Hamilton, 1911 Victory Drive. First of all, one of the things, this grant money is not free. You and I, our children and grandchildren, pay for all of this so-called grant money. Somebody's got to pay for it. And that is why I'm trying to rein in our overall spending in this country. Another concern I've had is the speed with which this stuff has gone through. Comes from a week ago when the first notice, at least I had, was what it was in the Courier. Then there were a couple of short blurbs in between, and for the meeting tonight, if I hadn't happened to look at my iPhone, I wouldn't have known about it. So I think this train has been moving a little bit too fast without opportunities for the public to have any input. And like I say, the other thing I would say is that it's been run through on really, really, really short notice. The mention of additional bridges, etc., I think is inconsequential when we look at the total picture. I would be more in favor of the city of Cedar Falls maintaining some control over this, because we don't know what the price of diesel fuel and some of this other comes in for transporting coal any distance at all. We don't want to be backed into a corner. And I'd be one of the first ones to say, I've been in a corner before, I don't like the feeling.
Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. Would anyone else from the public like to speak on the item? Evening, sir. Just name and address for the record, please.
Good afternoon. Roger White, 2303 Greenwood Avenue. And while I'm on the Bicycle Pedestrian Committee, I'm speaking for myself tonight. And I want to thank the council for this reconsideration opportunity. I was disappointed when I heard the vote after it was the program or the proposal was first considered. And I contacted some council members, in fact, to express my disappointment. And I'm thrilled that reconsideration is back on the agenda tonight. So thank you for that. I want to speak in favor of the grant and the work that will be done for the good reasons that have been already laid out here. I don't want to be repetitious, but I am an ordinary citizen in addition to being on a city committee, and I've been following this. It was possible to keep on top of what was happening. I've been out of town for a while. Finally got back today, so I'm here to speak. But the benefits that the city will gain from this, to me, far exceed what our investment will be, and that since the railroad is intending to abandon anyway, once it's abandoned, then we have the problem of filling in those crossings across the street, and in fact rebuilding Fifth Street itself, where the train comes right down the middle of the street. And without the grant, we'll be taking it all out of our other capital improvement money. And so I think the fact that this grant will lessen the city's outlay to do what looks like is going to happen anyway once the track is abandoned would be a good thing, a great opportunity. And then there's the spin-off of the safety that's already been described, the spin-off of the possibility of extending the South Riverside Trail, as Andrew mentioned, is another great opportunity. I see just a lot of good opportunities if the grant is forward with a positive recommendation. So that would be my input. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. White. Would anyone else like to speak on the item? Yes, ma'am. Name and address for the record, please.
Deb Eel, 4219 East Park Road. I am chairman at CFU for the board, and I just asked for a point of clarification, maybe from Tom or the railroad. They had mentioned about Shell Rock being the place where the coal comes in. I'm curious what the cost for trucking the coal from Shell Rock, how that would compare to any other option, if is that a fairly cost-effective way to get the coal in here versus maintaining the railroad?
Okay. Sure. I'll allow that response. It's an expert response. We
So
can't
we
answer.
do have a coal unloading facility down at the Cedar Falls Utilities, just east of the power plant. And there is an option if we wanted to, we could relocate that, perhaps out at Shell Rock. But again, our issue is the mines that we would purchase from don't have rail access. But it still is a possibility, to answer your question, that we could transload it at Shell Rock. Perhaps that's something that the railroad has mentioned, but the unloading facility equipment is still operational. It's at our facility, and that's still an option. If we needed to, we could relocate it.
Okay. Thank you, Tracy. Any other public comment tonight? Okay. It's one chance to speak per public speaker. So if no others wish to speak, then I'll bring it back to council. And would just want to note on the grant money side, the way I see it, it was Congress that authorized the funds. And so the funds are going to be spent in some community. We can either have it or try to have it spent here in Cedar Falls, or we can not put in an application and have it spent somewhere else. My personal choice is, as much as I don't like government overspending and our national debt, it's a whole different topic, a different question. And what's on the table tonight is receiving a grant that I believe could help the community. And then for the speed of it, certainly having the chance to reconsider hopefully has given more people the ability to see the issue and to speak to council members if they have concerns. So with that, turning it back over to council for kind of closing comments here, any final thoughts? I would like to know, is there anything from that meeting that was had on Thursday, additional information that was provided? Is there anything else that we didn't cover tonight that was an insight to you that you didn't have in the last meeting that you'd want to bring in for Councilmember Schultz?
Yeah, I think the Councilmember Danfield already mentioned how over the next 3 years this would happen. So it'd be 400,000 over the next 3 years, and it wouldn't be just the 1.2 just bang right now. Also, the funding sources for that through the TIF, through the option sales tax, and then from our funds. So it's not as burdensome. And then the payoff of the land we'll gain, the safety we'll experience, and so I think that I'm in favor of moving forward with having this partnership with the grant.
Any other thoughts?
Mr. Mayor, can I just say a couple things? And I don't have anything that's probably not already said, but just last time I didn't say anything because I just thought this was so clear, but apparently it was not. First, thanks for Cedar Falls Utilities and for the railroad for coming back in tonight and offering your expertise. May I ask Mr. McGee a question, or may I not
Certainly,
do that?
please.
Okay.
That's fine.
Mr. McGee, you said you've been in Cedar Falls for 20 years. I assume you were with a railroad or a rail company before that. How long have you worked for a rail company?
30 years.
Okay, thanks for your expertise. Did I hear right when I heard CFU say right now the price of coal is $9?
Yeah, on a dollars per million BTU basis, replacement coal is in that $8 to $9, upper $8, near $9 range.
And that's what we were paying at the height of that cold spell that we had in 2021 for natural gas?
Natural gas was over $200.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So that's why we elected to burn the coal.
Okay, but right now, we're paying about $4, or did I not understand that right? What's the cost comparison to natural gas and coal? And I understand the reason we burned coal in 2021,
Yes.
but what's the cost comparison right now?
Okay, so far for the month, our average cost that we get at the power plant is for the month is $7.18 so far. When I looked at it this morning, it changes daily.
Okay.
Today's price was right around $5. It fluctuates.
Okay.
We've seen it as high as $9 in this year, and it's been as low as $4.50. So it's pretty volatile. As you know, a lot of it's being liquefied and sent overseas. So.
Okay. Because there's more of a market for coal overseas. That's why we can't even really get it up here.
Right.
Okay.
I'm not saying that you can't get it. It's just
But by rail.
difficult to get such a low tonnage in.
Sure.
And the mines that we would get it from, the Stoker mines, they don't have rail access any longer. Now, the pulverized coal mines do, but a lot of that is being sold overseas, like I said.
Sure. Okay. So the way I look at this is it's first of all, I agree with the mayor. This is federal money. And we all know that the money that comes from the federal government is our money. I don't think that's any thing that's a surprise. But I believe that this is part of the infrastructure bill from the federal government? First of all, thanks for the railroad for letting us know about this, if I heard that correctly. When did the grant, because I know usually there's some time limitations or a time frame on grant money. When did we know about that, or when did you folks know about the grant?
I believe it was in early July.
Of this year?
When the notice of funding opportunity came out.
Okay, and when do we have to,
We knew that it was coming because it was announced in November of last year.
Okay.
But the actual notice of funding opportunity came out in July.
Okay.
They can only give you about 90 days.
Okay, exactly. So there's a time frame there. That's why sometimes it feels like we're moving quickly, but there's only a small chance for opportunity. And I've never wrote or applied for a grant, but I believe it takes some time and talent to apply. Yes, okay. So the main thing I just want to repeat again is the city does not own this railroad. We don't have the control over it right now. And we spend 1.2 million, but what is the worth of the land again? So we spend 1.2 and then.
The discounted amount was 2.6 million.
Okay, so it sounds like, so that's a profit, right? I mean, we're spending 1.2 and we're getting 2.6 for land that otherwise, if you abandoned it, it wouldn't be ours anyway. Okay. I don't think I'm saying anything profound, but I just wanted to point these things out because last time I was quiet, and I just want to make sure I'm not quiet again. So that's it. Thank you for coming here again tonight.
I do have one more thing to offer.
Yeah.
This is the first round for this particular opportunity. And I can't think of a better candidate. I mean, we're not talking about closing one crossing and spending $20 million building an overpass. We're talking about closing 24 crossings.
So on that note, it's because of safety concerns, right? Railroad crossings are tending to be not safe, and I bet they cost us a lot of money because of accidents that can happen at them. Is that a good assumption?
It's a good assumption, and something you have to think about. You know, when you have a track that's very busy, and it has lots of trains on it, and they're moving at speed, that's one type of danger. But with what we do here, we operate so infrequently when we come in, people don't know how to deal with that. They don't know what to do. And you don't have to look very far to see videos of trains coming in and out of here that have been taken recently. You should look at one because people are all over the place. They're driving in front of the train, they're driving around it, you name it. Bicycles, the flangeways in the track are very dangerous for bicycles.
Oh.
I'll stop there. That's kind of where we are.
Right, exactly, because that's how people, if you don't go straight across the track, if your tire gets caught in the track, that's how many bicycle accidents happen. Okay.
Mr. Mayor? Yeah, just in regards to the other information gained Thursday, I appreciate you, Mr. McGee. I think you said you'd spent upwards of 5 to 6 weeks working on this grant and putting it all together, so I appreciate your hard work and creativity and bringing that to us. Those were pieces I did not know before that meeting. In addition to that, the timetable was a little bit crunched here, and the deadline of, I believe it's October 4th is the grant application deadline. So that was one thing that actually said, okay, we're applying for a grant potential here. We're not expending the money today. So that was a change. And then in addition, I would reiterate a few other things, but I don't want to be redundant. The cost and use of coal. We're not using a ton of coal here locally because we're buying from the western region. But the cost to get even a rail car, 100 cars of pulverized coal in here, Mr. Bernard said that it would be immaterial, the difference between trucking in the coal that we would need in that stoker capacity versus the complexity of getting in 100 cars full of that pulverized. So bringing in coal by rail isn't really a viable option, or the difference in cost is negligible. To Mrs. Eel's point, it wasn't a grand difference. He didn't have the exact numbers, but it was immaterial. I can quote him on that. So
Yes.
that was the items I gained Thursday, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you.
Mr.
So,
Mayor?
yes, Councilmember, sorry.
This is just a quick question. Could we put our coal car unloader over in the North Industrial Park, over by where our co-op is,
I think it could.
off Leversey Road? And then you could deliver right there, so we didn't have to go all the way to Shell Rock?
That's the Canadian National that serves that park.
Okay,
It's a different railroad.
all right, thank you.
And so that'd be a different conversation. Certainly possible. Okay, anything else that we need to talk about in council? I feel like the information that came out, the only thing that we didn't discuss here but is in the memo that I didn't know last time is that 100 cars of coal. In the memo it says, last coal shipment received by rail was 2010. By that time, the long-haul railways would no longer deliver less than 100 cars of coal. We took a 100-car shipment in 2010, and not long after that, the markets changed so much that our runtime reduced. So a 100-car railway delivery would be 10,000, 12,000 tons, which I understand is about what we have on hand now. 23,000 tons. So we have double that on hand. So we have 200 cars. And in the conversation, correct me if I'm wrong, but hearing from Steve Bernard, he said that it's not practical for us to take 100 cars. We just don't need that much coal at any one time. So getting that kind of a delivery wouldn't even be practical. So that's just information I didn't have last time, that it wouldn't be a common occurrence to be able to get 100 cars in.
And Mr. Mayor, I believe he also stated that was one of the reasons why the university was purchasing from our pile, because they couldn't get a delivery either. So it was more economical for them to pull from our reserves.
Okay. So with that covers everything that we talked about on Thursday, and I think gets everyone up to speed on the same page. So if nothing else for discussion, then it's been motioned and seconded, and I'll read that to make sure we have it. So this is a motion and a second for a resolution approving and authorizing submission of a railroad crossing elimination grant to the Federal Railroad Administration, and approving and authorizing local match relative to abandoning and removing the Cedar Falls rail spur. It's been motioned and seconded and requires a roll call vote.
Schultz,
Aye.
Cruz,
Aye.
Harding,
Aye.
Gamfield,
Aye.
Sires,
Nay.
Dunn.
Aye.
5 voting aye, 1 voting nay, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And so that does pass. And what that does for now is allows this grant to be submitted. As mentioned earlier, it doesn't obligate any funds at this point. We'd still have to receive the grant. So that application will go forward no later than October 4th is the deadline. So this gives the staff and our stakeholders enough information to move forward with the finalization of that grant. And information will be pending whether we receive that or not. Question for Mr. McGee, since you would know, any idea when we would hear back from that process? Did they state?
March 2023.
I've worked with a number of grants in the past few years with a program they call CRISI, which is also administered through the FRA, Federal Railroad Administration. And generally, when you get your application turned in, it's 4 to 6 months before you hear whether you were awarded the grant or not. So
Okay.
that's about what you could expect. I think that's where March came from.
Okay, excellent.
And I would think that would be at the latest.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. With that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you. Have a good night.